Hello and welcome to episode 13 of the Ego Chall Podcast, a Call of Duty esports podcast. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I'm with Justin Binkowski. How are you doing, Bink?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing good. Today we're going to be talking about Stage 3, Week 3 of the Call of Duty League, the final week of Stage 3 group play. We're also going to be talking about the Stage 3 Major, a $500,000 event coming up this week, and just some mid-season update and a little bit of LAN news, thankfully, that we got earlier in the week. So do you want to just start at the top with the Stage 3 Week 3 stuff? We could also talk about, real quick, that we pushed this back a day. We were planning on doing this yesterday, Monday, May 10th, and the CDO actually pushed back the Stage 3 Major. They changed the schedule. Typically, these had run Wednesday through Sunday, and they pushed it back to Tuesday through Sunday, which coincides with how
Thursday.
Thursday. Yeah. So this is how they usually go, and so now we're here, and I think if they keep it like this and everything runs Thursday through Sunday, we'll always be on Tuesday unless something comes up, right?
Yeah, that's pretty much what I was thinking.
Yeah. So now that we got that out of the way, let's start with the last week of group play matches. We had 10 matches, as always. Started on Thursday. Between LAG and Minnesota, and New York versus OpTic on the first day. Minnesota, unfortunately for me, they come out and they win. They win 3-2 over LAG, and New York beat OpTic in a big match for I believe Group B standings, because OpTic at that point were kind of really on the edge. They needed another win to hopefully get into the top three for the major. They obviously didn't get that. Any thoughts on these two matches here?
Yeah, so like you said, that pretty heartbreaking loss for your Gorillas there at the start.
I'm used to it now.
I believe, did the Gorillas play twice this week, or did they only play once? I'm already
No,
forgetting.
they
No,
played twice. They played Florida.
Yeah, so
on
going
Saturday.
into this, they were 1-2,
Mm-hmm.
and like a win in this match would have helped them keep their winners bracket hopes alive for the major, but didn't end up working out that way. Most notably, though, the thing that stuck out the most to me was the round 11 in game 2, where it was similar. I don't remember who was playing, but I know it was on Miami earlier in the season, where Minnesota had a round 11 and Priesta teammated Attach, or somebody teammated Priesta, something like that. Similar situation happened again, where Standy picks up a team kill with another grenade here to start the round, and then Minnesota comes back, gets an answer, or responds, gets a kill to trade it, and then after planting the bomb on Moscow Surge, they just threw a blind nade through the window that stuck Silly, I believe. So it's it goes from a 3v4 for Minnesota to a 2v3 in favor of Minnesota, but then the Gorillas clutch up because Chino just has that ice, I guess, and he dropped 14, I believe, in the map. So this was just a crazy round for those of you watching the video. Preston's got it pulled up on stream now. Right here was just that teammate. It's just he didn't even see, he didn't even know Silly was coming. Just got blessed. It was pretty awesome. But the girls clutched up. That was kind of the only shining. I mean, obviously they win that map, and they win checkmate hardpoint map 4, 250 to 145. But other than that, Minnesota took the first hardpoint 250 to 198. They took raid control 3-0, and then they win Miami Search game 5, 6-4. So, yeah, that was a big win for Minnesota. Obviously, coming into that, both teams were trying to go for the winners bracket spot still, and at that time, this put the Rocker at 2-2, so their winners bracket hopes were still alive going into their last showdown with Dallas. So yeah, that's pretty much it for that map. I don't know if you have anything you want to add for that one.
No, basically, obviously, I think LAG are a good team, and that's no cap. I actually do think they're good. I thought they were capable of more with Vivid in that lineup, and they underachieved. and they've come really close to winning several matches now. Obviously, they lost to Rocker here. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but they lost to Florida in another Game 5. I believe they had another close match last week as well. So that's 3 matches that really could have went the other way. And had they, and obviously that's easy to say about, if you won all these Game 5s, but to lose most of those Game 5s really hurts them in the standings, and that's why they'll be starting in the losers bracket of the Stage 3 major. But they definitely could make some noise in the major, and we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. What about the OpTic Subliners match? Subliners pulled it out 3-1.
Yeah, so there's we'll have more to talk about New York as we get through it, but
Yeah.
basically OpTic only won the control in this series. New York won both hard points. Map 1 was a 100-point club, and map 4 was 250 to 230, so obviously map 4 was a little bit closer, but New York also won the search 6-2. So it wasn't exactly the closest series. We can discuss OpTic in depth more if we want, but coming into this, like you said, it was kind of like New York had lost to London. Was it the week? Yeah, so week 2 they lost to London, I believe, and OpTic lost to the Thieves before the Thieves brought in Hook. So although New York had beaten FaZe before that match against London, they were still coming off that loss. I think they played like Seattle or something actually in that week when they lost to London as well. But regardless, it was still like a question of how good is this New York team with Hydra? Like, we'd only seen them play 3 matches before this showdown with OpTic with Hydra in the lineup, and then OpTic's coming off that loss to the Thieves, and questions are starting to come up as whether what's going on at OpTic. Like, is it another performance in just week 2 struggles, where in the previous stage they had that O2 week and stage 2 week 2 group play, and then this week they only played one match, but they lost it, so it was kind of like a flip-flop, and then they bounced back in the 3rd week, so it was more of a question of, are they going to do that again? Didn't work out that way, and New York picked up a big win.
Yeah, we'll talk about OpTic a little bit later when they played FaZe, and we can go into a deeper conversation about OpTic and where they go from here. So let's go to the next day of matches. Seattle versus Atlanta and Florida versus Dallas. Let's start with this Florida match. Florida wins 3-0. Obviously, Dallas, they've been criticized for benching Hook and then eventually trading Hook away to the Los Angeles Thieves, and they lose 3-0 here. What do you make of this loss and their time with Fellows so far?
I was really surprised by this one. I didn't necessarily think Dallas was going to come out and 3-0 Florida necessarily, but to see Florida come out in 3-0 Dallas was super surprising, let alone, like, I would have been surprised even if Florida won 3-2, but just the way they were able to take this series was kind of impressive. They actually won Moscow Hardpoint 230 to 198. It went down to time, which was this? Okay, so this was the first time, yeah, and then the following day another hardpoint came down to time. So I don't remember. It was some crazy stat on the broadcast where they were saying like how few hard points have come down to time compared to the 250 score. But yeah, so I was just really surprised with Florida coming out and taking care of business like they did. Skies in general had a really strong series of 1.52 KD. Havoc and Awakening both at 1.11s, and Neptune had a 1.09, whereas Shotzi had the highest on Dallas with a 1.0 going 51 and 51. So it was a really big series for Florida. It set the stage for them to, as we'll talk about later, get a winner's bracket spot, because looming on the final day of Stage 3 group play was the Dallas versus Minnesota match, and because Florida beat both of them, it basically like ensured they had a tiebreaker over whichever team won that match. So it was a really big win and a surprising one for me.
As for the Seattle-Atlanta match, Atlanta wins 3-1. You said in the notes that this may have been the first twin battle between Arcides and Pristini of the year, and it goes to Arcides, and he has an incredible series. According to Breaking Point, he had a 1.44 series KD, which is the highest in the entire lobby phase. They kind of dominate in the slaying department, at least. Arcides, Abizi, Celium all have over 1.0, and nobody on Seattle ended up with an even KD. What did you think of FaZe's win here?
Yeah, so this was FaZe's first match of the week. Yeah. And I'm trying to run through all the matches in my head real quick. They had played New York only in the first match, and then they had won 2 last week. So then that means they came into this one on a 2-game win streak.
Yes.
Regardless of if that's right or not, I think it is.
They had won 3-2 over Thieves and 3-2 over London last week.
Okay, yeah, so that's right. So yeah, they just carried their momentum. This is a series that you expect FaZe to win, regardless of like the what kind of form you think they're in. I mean, it's still crazy to me that some people are like doubting this FaZe team just because of the Stage 2 major. Like when you look at the CDL point standings for the overall season, they are 18-3 in series this year.
Yeah.
They've lost 3 series in total. The next closest is the Subliners have lost 8, but they're 14-8. That's just like remarkable to me, just how strong FaZe have been. And some people have been doubting them because of, S&D issues, whatever the case may be. I just think this was Seattle's or Decimate's debut with Seattle too. So that was just another reason where Atlanta kind of, you were expecting Atlanta to win against a team with making a roster change and having minimal practice with that roster. Seattle did win the first map though. They where are my notes? They took Apocalypse Hardpoint 250 to 188, which at this time Apocalypse had been showing up recently. I know we've been talking about it, but it had been showing up a lot more. So I still am not sure if teams are actually like testing it to try to add to their map pool, or teams are playing it because they actually enjoy playing it. But it's definitely worth noting. I feel like I've seen FaZe playing it a lot, so it might be something they're trying out in group play compared to at the major. I guess we'll find out this week. But regardless, they lose that map 1 to Seattle, and then they take care of business the rest of the series. And I'm pretty sure this was the first battle between Arcides and Pristini of the year, just because Seattle hadn't been in their group previously, and obviously FaZe was always in the winners bracket of the majors, and Seattle was in the lower bracket. So I didn't do like too much research into it, but I'm pretty sure it was the first showdown, which was cool. I believe the only other time they had played against each other in their careers would have been at the beginning of MW when Pristini was on Florida and they won. They had that reverse sweep. I believe it was in the Atlanta home series, because then Florida played Atlanta in the grand finals and Atlanta won, if my memory serves me. So now I believe they both have a 1-1 series count against each other, which is kind of cool. I guess we'll see how it plays out, obviously, throughout the rest of their careers. But long-winded way of saying this was a series that was kind of exciting just to see it from that storyline perspective, but it was one you expect FaZe to win, and they got the job done.
The Search and Destroy problems that FaZe have or had, they're really over-exaggerated, because other than a loss to New York, so they split Search and Destroy against the Thieves and New York in Stage 3 group play. Other than that, they won all the other searches. They went 6-2 in Stage 3 group play in Search. So that's pretty good win percentage in a game mode. And I know that there's been a lot of talk about how Tupac has come in and he's kind of helped this team. They were already a good Search team. They had a slump, and that's to be expected, especially how high and how well they were playing at the time. But I think they're fine. They're looking great in Search in most games. So I think that if there's anyone doubting FaZe because of Search and Destroy specifically, you're mistaken, because that's
Yeah.
not something you should worry about on a major scale. And that kind of segues into the next match on Saturday: Toronto versus Paris. Toronto sweeps the Legion, and this makes it 6 straight S&D victories for the Ultra, 11-1 in their past 12 search and destroy maps. This is incredible. Obviously, this has helped them get to 5-0 in Stage 3 group play, and they were obviously very successful in search and destroy in the Stage 2 major, which they won. What do you think of Toronto at their current form?
Yeah, I mean, right now they're just. I think they have to be the best team in the game, regardless of, like we were just talking about, FaZe's record. They've only lost 3 series. Toronto is the defending major champions, and they just went 5-0 in group play. Which did FaZe end up going 5? So FaZe did go 5-0 in Stage 1. Nobody went undefeated in Stage 2, and then Toronto does it in this stage. So, I mean, right now it's just a question of who's going to beat them. The last team to beat them was FaZe. When they played in that winners bracket. Was it when it was winners bracket finals? I believe in the Stage 2 major. Because then Toronto comes back and
winners bracket semis, I think.
Semis. Yes, because Toronto played OpTic,
Yeah.
and then Toronto went to Atlanta. Okay. So yeah, regardless, I mean, I just think, you know, this was another one on paper where you just expected Toronto to win, right? Paris is still a relatively new roster with this iteration of Temp. It seems like they're flip-flopping. Now it seems like Temp is running the second AR and Scraps is back on a sub, so maybe they're trying to figure out what roles they prefer, because originally Temp started on the sub and Scraps was on that second AR, so Paris is still working on things. It's not champs time yet, so the Paris is winning champs crowd has some time to breathe. I mean, obviously Paris has to get some points to make it the champs, but that's another issue for another day. You still just coming into it would have been a massive upset if Paris took down Toronto, but Toronto didn't even let that happen. Just 3-0 swept them and secured that, you know, number 1 seed, undefeated record. You know, massive winning streak, whatever you want to say. Just right now they're riding high, and heading into the major, the big question for me is, can anyone beat them?
Since that loss to FaZe on April 9th, so it's been over a month. Since that loss to FaZe in the Stage 2 major, the Toronto Ultra are 29-6 in map count.
Wow.
Yeah, so they obviously had 4 sweeps in Stage 3 group play. They went
Really?
Yeah, they only had 1 map loss in group play. It was to the Rocker. So they've been on fire, and to be honest, 3 of those map losses, so 29-6, 3 of those were in the grand finals of the Stage 3 major against FaZe. So yeah, take that as you will. Toronto's really, really good. I don't know, like it's gonna be interesting. I know that some people still believe in FaZe, and rightfully so. There's no reason to really not believe in them, but it's very hard to bet against Toronto right now. Although I did see our boy Crone, he tweeted out the betting odds. I don't know what site this was, but he tweeted out the betting odds for the Stage 3 major, and FaZe were actually the favorites to win the major, which surprised me, to be honest. So obviously Toronto second, but man, if I'm a bettor and I see those odds and Toronto is not the overwhelming favorite to win, I think you put money on them. Just my personal opinion, and at least. But yeah, Toronto really good. There's no other way to say it. They're on fire right now. Another big match of the weekend was the New York Subliners versus the Los Angeles Thieves. This was essentially to finish first in the group. Both of them were 3-1. FaZe was also 3-1, so there were potential tiebreakers at play. But since New York defeated Atlanta in their match in Stage 3 group play, and New York won this match 3-1, they officially clinched the first seed in Group B. What did you think of this series?
Yeah, I mean, this was Hook's debut for the Thieves, and the Thieves only had this one match remaining in Stage 3 group play, so Obviously, a very small sample size of this new Thieves roster. But some people were expecting Thieves to come out and take care of business against New York again. Before Stage 3 group play, New York were 2-1. They had that loss against London, and maybe it's just me like overthinking it, but some people had to have been thinking like, what does that loss mean against London? Was
Yeah.
it just a fluke, or was it an actual upset, or something that New York fans had to worry about? But New York came out this week and they took down OpTic and they took down the Thieves. And the biggest thing, they end up going 4-1, clinching that number 1 seed in Group B. And the biggest catalyst for this new New York team success is their hardpoint play, where they went 9-0 throughout Stage 3 group play, which I think is pretty impressive.
Yeah, definitely.
And there was a graphic on stream that I screenshotted. I don't remember if this was only after map 1 or if it even counts. So it said entering today. So it probably didn't count either of the hard points from this series against the Thieves, which New York again won 2 hard points to take down the Thieves in this series. But so before this matchup, Hydra had the number 1 hardpoint KD in the league with a 1.38. You gotta remember, this is still, obviously Hydra has been that hyped up rookie, but this was still his first stage in the league, and he's, got the number 1 hardpoint KD. That's impressive. Clayster was behind him in third. Hydra had a 1.38. I don't remember if I said it. And Clayster had a 1.24 in third. Mac had a 1.06 and was in 15th for hardpoint KD, which, he's making that switch with Hydra replacing DiamondCon. This is really his first stage where he's full-time using a second AR for the most part, so good on him. And then Asim, doing the dirty work. He's got a 0.99, but that's good for 24th in the league in hardpoint. So that just speaks to, obviously, New York's got a recipe right now where hardpoint is going to be their key to success, so they just got to find a way to take map 2, 3, 5, one of those, in order to get the job done and take a series win. So coming to the major, that's going to be the big thing for me surrounding New York. They got that bye. In my opinion, they have a favorable first round matchup for them in the winners bracket to almost guarantee them a top 4 finish, depending on who they end up playing. But it's, in my eyes, they're going to be on their hard point. Can they, obviously when you're undefeated, it's not necessarily easy to keep that up, but is that going to be their recipe for success? Can they continue to be undefeated in hardpoint, or are they going to have to, is somebody going to figure out a way to take them down in hardpoint, and then how will New York respond? All that. That's what I'm going to be looking for in the major.
Yeah, it's very interesting because we have been talking about for a few stages now about when Hydra would come in. But in the early stages, we were talking about, well, when will he even be able to get to America? And then we found that out in February. He was going to be there in March. And New York, coincidentally, they do poorly at the Stage 2 Major. They lose all 6 of their maps, and that brings in Hydra. And, New York hasn't looked perfect. It hasn't been like Toronto, where it's obvious that they're just so far ahead of everybody, but this is a new team, essentially. Like you said, Mac has had to make that adjustment in his role, and Hydra is coming in. He's not a native English speaker, and he hasn't been around these players, and he hasn't really learned, and he's never been at this level as well. We have to remember that. He was in challengers, in European challengers, and they had success. And then he came and he was very briefly in the North American challengers, but he had really never been at this level. He hadn't had the experience, and it's still really impressive that he's been able to be the Slayer that we've been hyping him up to be. And I'm glad that he's having this success, because it's fun to watch a rookie play like this. Although we could say the same for Insight, who's having an incredible rookie season. And I mean, to me, he's probably the Rookie of the Year front runner.
He's got to be right now.
Yeah. So
he won a major, and
so Hydra is actually, maybe he'll give him a run for his money if New York can start winning championships, and and they can continue this run. We'll
Yep.
see. So LAG versus Florida to end Saturday. Florida pulls off a 3-2 victory, another Game 5 loss for the Gorillas. But this is a big win for Florida. What do you make of this?
Yep. So yeah, the biggest thing for me is the turnaround. We talked about it before. Obviously, I mean, it feels like so long ago just thinking about some of these changes, but like so many rosters in stage 3 haven't had a ton of time together.
Yeah.
So this is still only Florida's 5th map with Havoc replacing Slacked. But obviously, before this last change, Florida struggled in group play. They went 1-4 in stage 1 groups, came in last place in Group B, and then they went 2-3 in stage 2 and came in last place in Group B. There was other teams that were 2-3, but because of tiebreakers, they ended up in last place. So now this is the first time they're going to be starting the major in the winners bracket, which is a huge advantage. They all automatically aren't fighting for their life right away down in the lower bracket. They went on that little run in the stage 1 major, but this is just a sign of good things to come if you're a Florida fan. It's obviously the most excited Florida fans have to be since last year when they were winning a couple championships. It's more of what those fans are used to just in this brief history of the CDL. So yeah, another heartbreak hotel loss for the Gorillas, but
They'll be
it's
back.
interesting to see this turnaround for Florida so quickly. If you look at the teams in Group A, just heading into Stage 3 group play, most people probably expected Toronto, Dallas, and Minnesota to be the top 3 in Group A, just because Florida, Gorillas, and Paris all made roster changes, and obviously Dallas ends up making the Hook change mid-stage 3. So that's why I'm saying heading into stage 3,
Yeah.
most people were probably expecting Toronto, Dallas, and Minnesota to take those top spots, but Florida comes out and they do go 3-2. But the most important thing, which I touched on earlier, was they got a win over Dallas and Minnesota to lock in that winners bracket spot, regardless of whoever won the Dallas and Minnesota match to end stage 3 group play on Sunday.
Yeah, Group A was a battle. You had, obviously Toronto was never in doubt. They go 15-1 in maps, but Florida, Dallas, and Minnesota and LAG all have 9 or 10 map wins. Florida with 10-9, Dallas 9-10, Minnesota 9-12, LAG 9-12. So there was a lot of contention in Group A in the middle.
Gorillas had the same map count as Rocker?
Yeah, 9-12.
Wow.
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, they lost, I believe, at least 3 Game 5s in group play, and I mean that's the difference though. Like they won their first match of group play, and then they lost the remaining 4, and 3 of those were Game 5s. That's huge. They could have went 4-1 in group play. So I mean that's why I say there's nothing to, I don't know, it's not like the end of the world. It's not like they're getting blown out and there's no hope for the team. There's obviously something there, or there could be something there, I guess. But we've been talking about that with LAG since the beginning of the season because, at least in my opinion, I thought with the former EG lineup, the chemistry there plus Vivid, that there was a good opportunity to be a middle-of-the-road team, to basically be in like a 6-7 spot. They're obviously not there, and they probably won't get there because of how the CDL points are shaping up, and if they can't win their Game 5s and finish out series, they're definitely not going to get there. But there's no reason to think that they can't pull off a few wins at the major. But for Florida, this was the roster change I think I was most skeptical about, bringing Havoc in, and that's not a shot at Havoc or anything, because I think he's a really good guy, and they had success with him in last year's iteration of their roster, but he had been on their bench the entire season, so I figured Florida knows what they're doing, that they know that bringing in Neptune over him, they thought, well, okay, we're just going to be a better team with Neptune. And maybe they would have been, but benching Slacked, like you said, they needed a leadership presence, and we weren't really sure if Havoc really brought that because, well, we don't really know how their team comms go, but or we didn't at the time. But I didn't think that Havoc would make a huge difference on this team, even with the amount of talent that they have. Obviously, Skies and Awakening are two animals, and Neptune is still learning as a rookie. But they proved that they can pull off these close games, and that's really what it's about, especially in such a tough group where you have a lot of talented teams and teams that are going down to the wire. They pulled out these wins, and that's really what matters at the end.
Yeah, and I mean, just real quick to not have to stay on it too long, but like we're again a couple weeks removed from before the Hook change. Some people were saying that the Vivid for Chino change like could have been one of the worst roster changes of all time, right?
Yeah.
And like obviously, they go 1-4 in the stage, so they don't have the series results. But like you said, they have the same map count as Minnesota, so like you said, just a couple game fives away from being in a different position. That at least has to speak to something, in my opinion, of the potential of this roster. It might not be yielding the series results that some people might, like LAG fans like yourself want to see, but it's got to mean something. So, hope, I don't want to say hopefully, but maybe in the major, the Gorillas might be able to pull something off. It would be especially nutty if they did, just based on how the bracket would shake up and what it would mean. But we'll talk about that later, obviously.
Yeah, let's move on to the last day of the week. London versus Seattle, OpTic versus FaZe, and Minnesota versus Dallas. Let's save OpTic Atlanta for the last. London versus Seattle. London wins 3-1. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I don't think we have to spend too much time on the series again. It's just limited practice with
the two worst teams in the standings, by the way, in this match.
Yeah, pretty much. Seattle does win the search in this, which is kind of interesting. We had talked about Decimate's, past and knowledge and search and destroy. And that's obviously, we talked about Seattle's struggles and control this year. So that's like their worst mode just by far based on, their win-loss record in the mode. But, maybe Decimate coming in, this just shows that he can help them in search. Obviously, small sample size, so we're not sure. We don't know for sure. But other than that, London takes the respawns. All 4 players on London have positive KDs, whereas Octane was the only one positive on Seattle. Pristini struggled. Decimate and Gunless both dropped 0.97. So, yeah, not much to say about this one, really.
What happens first? Seattle winning control or LAG winning a game 5?
Well, we could find out because that's the first match of the major.
What if it happens in the same series?
It could, yeah.
Does like the
CDL
if it happens
just
in
shut
the same
down? Series, then Seattle is the correct answer because it would happen first.
Touche. So let's jump to Dallas, Minnesota. Dallas wins 3-1. They've obviously kind of been owned by the Rocker this season, despite and I believe they faced off twice before this, if I'm not mistaken. And in both series, Dallas was favored. They were thought to be the favorites in those series, and Minnesota won each of them. They win 3-1 here. What did you think of this series?
I don't know what Josh just said. Okay, gonna move on from that one.
You got baited really hard.
Yeah, something was going on with the stream, and then he says that. Oh man, totally lost my train of thought. But yeah, Minnesota, Dallas, like you kind of alluded to. Pretty sure it's the first time Dallas was able to take care of business and actually beat Minnesota. Notably, Dallas won both hard points in the series.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the first time they played in stage 1, Dallas won both hard points, but Minnesota won the searches and control, so they won that way. And then I think the next time it like kind of flipped, where Minnesota was winning the searches, or Minnesota won the hard points, Dallas won the search, but Minnesota still took the series.
Yeah.
something like that. So regardless, Dallas comes back and they win the hard point and the search. Minnesota only takes the control 3-2. Other than that, Dallas won the series. So this was a big bounce back, coming off of Dallas getting 3-0 swept by Florida earlier in the week, and this was obviously based on that result with Florida beating the Gorillas. This match was the final match of Stage 3 group play, but it was also the match to determine which of these two teams would be in the winner's bracket for the major and who would be in the loser's bracket. So, really big win for the Empire. Let me pull up the stats real quick from Breaking Point. Nothing pops off the page really in the stats department for Empire. Fellow and Shotzi both had the highest KD on the team with a 1.01. Attached dropped a 1.12 for Minnesota in a losing effort, but so that's kind of surprising. I guess that can kind of attest to, Dallas maybe taking a more team-oriented style compared to some of these other teams where, like you got Big Wake popping off to lead series where other guys are far behind. In this one, Dallas is, all the KDs are relatively close. So maybe a sign of good things to come if you're like Trem and you're a Dallas fan. But yeah, it was a big win.
Yeah, so Dallas went 2-2 with Fellow in the lineup in Stage 3 group play. They won 3-1 over Paris with Hook in the lineup.
Yes.
And then I believe they went 6-8 in map count with Fellow in the lineup, if my math is correct. So
that would mean they got 3-0'd, and did they get 3-0'd by Toronto?
Yeah, and Florida.
Yeah, so then you're right. They won 2 series, so 6 maps. And
So
yep.
What do you think of Dallas with Fellow instead of Hook?
I still think it's too early to tell. Like, I mean, we keep saying, like, all these teams are such a limited sample size. Obviously, some are smaller than others. With, Hook has played 1 match with the Thieves. Decimate has played 2 matches.
They're trash with them. No.
Okay. but still, like, we've only seen 4 matches with Fellow. There's other guys like Havoc and Temp. We've only seen them play 5 matches with their news team. So it'll still be interesting to see how they play in a major now. It's a little different than group play for some people, especially because it's like that tournament environment, and it's not on land yet for this one. So the big difference will be going from Stage 4 group play to Stage 4 LAN, in my opinion. But we're not there yet. So yeah, I think it's still a work in progress for the Empire. I think it's good for them to get that winner's bracket spot. So, if they're going into this major and they had lost the series to Minnesota, let's say, and they're immediately fighting for their life in the loser's bracket, and they had lost that first match in the loser's bracket against whoever it would have been, then a lot of questions would have been popping up. More questions than people have already been asking about this Fellow for Hook change. They do have a tough first round matchup in the winner's bracket against Atlanta. We can touch on that later. But I think it's still too early to tell, in my opinion, whether the roster is better or worse exactly with Fellow, and we will see over time. If based on what we've heard from the Empire camp, that communication was the big issue or the proponent for the change, and we're going to have to see if the communication improves throughout the rest of the season with this new roster.
All right, so let's get to it wasn't the grand finale. It should have been the grand finale, in my opinion. OpTic versus FaZe. It's always the biggest match, at least for viewership, when these two teams are both good. And FaZe, they come out and they sweep OpTic, and it's really not that close. Unfortunately for OpTic fans, it's a 100-point club on Raid Hardpoint, a 6-2 win for FaZe on Moscow, and a 3-0 Raid Control win for FaZe. And I guess I'll give a little background of like what happened after the match. Envoy says that he was told that the CDL host selected the wrong server in the match because of a typo in an email. He said, 1000% not why we lost, but this is unacceptable. And Formal says, obviously we got smoked, but it doesn't help. We just played on Atlanta host, all of us on 33 ping versus their 11 ping. So what did you think of this match and the reasoning given for why it was so lopsided?
Yeah, I mean, I think mm, how do I want to word this? It's obviously an unfortunate situation for Chicago, right? With them playing on Atlanta server, like that's immediately gonna give, like 11 and 33 pings are still good pings. I was talking about this
Yeah.
with Tremor last night. Like I usually play on like 50 ping when I have like just my Ethernet plugged in and I'm just playing league play. So like it's better than what I'm used to, that's for sure. But regardless, there's when you're playing at that high of a level, like that's just a big difference. And it seems like it was an honest mistake, and it's unfortunate for Chicago, but that's just what happened. I think regardless of what server the match was going to be played on, though, I still think FaZe would have come away with the win in this one, just based on how the teams were playing. Atlanta's coming in on a 3-game win streak, still one of the top teams in the game. OpTic's coming into the series with struggles, having lost to the Thieves and New York most recently before this match. So that would mean they were on a 2-game losing streak coming into this one. So yeah, I think regardless of outside circumstances, maybe it wouldn't have been a super lopsided 3-0 like the series ended up being, but I still think Atlanta would have gotten the job done in the end just based on recent performances.
So this is what we've talked about this the last two shows. We had a more in-depth conversation 2 shows ago, but OpTic, what's going on? Because this is their third consecutive loss. Obviously, like you said, they lost to the Thieves and then they lost to the Subliners, both 3-1. They lose 3-0 here. They won their first 2 matches of Stage 3 group play, albeit they were against the 2 worst teams in the entire league, London and Seattle. So, what's wrong with this team? Because on paper, as we've said countless times, it should be a top team, and until basically the Stage 2 major, they were a top team. They were, I believe, in third or something like that in the standings, and they're dropping quickly because of how clumped up everybody is in the CDL standings so far. So what's wrong with this team in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I have the same answer that I had last episode where it's just, I don't know. I honestly don't know what's going on. They have the talent, like you said, but just something isn't clicking. And like I said, I want to get the chance to interview or just talk to somebody over there to try to get a better idea of what's going on behind the scenes. But we did recently, or earlier today, Tactical Rab put out a video where he had some 2 minor clips from Scump just briefly talking or addressing his stream. I don't think he's been streaming too much recently. So like he streamed a Warzone tournament or something that OpTic was doing,
Mm-hmm.
and he just had some brief clips where he was basically saying that we have a lot of problems right now with the team, and he apologized to the fans for losing and said, "I don't know what to tell you guys, but trust me, we're losing absolute composure." So obviously, very brief statements from Scump on stream, but they don't really tell us too much in detail what's going on. But obviously, OpTic knows something's going wrong, and for all the Chicago fans out there, they're definitely hoping that they figure something out soon. And we're going to see OpTic is down in the losers bracket as a result of this match. First time this season that they're not starting in the winners bracket, and it's going to be interesting, man, to see how what they're able to pull off at this major. They had a tough road. Depending on how things shake out in the bracket, it's going to be tough for them to get a really good placing.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we've touched on it in multiple episodes that people expect, the Green Wall expects OpTic to win championships or at least be in the grand finals.
Yeah.
Even if they lose in the grand finals, there's Green Wall people who get mad, but they expect them to be there regardless. And, just based on the bracket on paper, it's going to be tough for them to get there. And, based on their recent performance, I'm not too sure they're going to be able to pull it off, but yeah, all eyes are going to be on them. They have they have no lifeline. They're fighting for their tournament life right away. They got to figure something out, and they don't have a lot of time to fix whatever mistakes have been popping up in group play. So definitely going to have all eyes on them. heading into the major this week.
So let's transition to the Stage 3 major. We've talked about it a little bit with OpTic. We've talked about it somewhat with Gorillas as well. Yeah, if you're watching the video version, then you can see the bracket for the Stage 3 major. You got FaZe, Dallas Empire, Florida Mutineers, the LA Thieves, Toronto Ultra, and New York Subliners. Those teams are in the winners bracket to start the event. Ultra and New York, since they finished first in their respective groups, they received 1 round buys. So really, they only need to win 2 series to win the entire major. Although the grand finals is a best of 9.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
you have to win, what is that? 3,
maps.
6, 11 maps to get there to win the championship. And Ultra, they won in a more convoluted and complicated way the last time around, but they have an advantage here. And this is the first time that FaZe doesn't have that 1 round advantage because they were starting out in the winners round 2 in both the stage 1 and stage 2 majors.
Yep.
In the losers bracket, we have my team, the LA Gorillas, the Seattle Surge, London Royal Ravens, Paris Legion, and starting in losers round 2, we have OpTic Chicago, which, like you said, they're not very used to starting down in the losers bracket, and the Minnesota Rocker. Do you want to start in the losers or the winners?
Yeah. Let's do the first 2 rounds of losers to set up for winners.
All right, so let's start with the Gorillas, the eventual champions, versus the Seattle Surge.
All you, buddy. You can go first.
I picked the LA Gorillas. I mean, I really do believe in them. I don't know if they're a championship contender like I have picked them for the last few majors, but at this point, they were 3 Game 5 wins away from maybe even... I mean, they wouldn't have gotten that first seed because of Ultra, but they would have started in winners bracket. I think they would have had Florida's spot, if I'm not mistaken. So
it would have been weird how it shook out, so I don't know.
So,
sure, but regardless.
Yeah, so they would have started in winners bracket, and they have looked decent in stage 3 with Chino. They've had some good clutches. Seattle hasn't looked great, although we're really still early in this Decimate run to see how their team is different without Looney and with Decimate. I still think LAG comes out on this one.
Yeah, I think, that's the big thing for me. It's still super early in this Decimate era for Seattle. I think LAG will get the job done here, but for the sake of the pod and for being different, I'm going to pick Seattle to win this one.
All right, London versus Paris. You start off this one.
Damn. I wanted you to start, but that's okay. Kind of similar thing. I think London is going to win this one just based on recent performance. London has looked like the better team. Obviously, they have that win over New York, and they most recently came off a win. It was against Seattle, right? Just talking about it.
Yeah, they just beat Seattle.
They beat Seattle on Mother's Day. So, and Paris has obviously struggled a bit with this new roster. So I think London should win this one. I am going to... For the sake of the Paris' winning champs crew, though, I'm going to go out on a limb and just pick Paris to win this one match.
Yeah, I was kind of flip-flopping here because like I said, I've said multiple shows, I try not to pick Paris against any team that's not a top team. And London is certainly not a top team despite having won a few matches in this stage and not looking horrible. But Paris has looked... not great with temp, and that's unfortunate. I love Donnie. He's like one of the coolest pros that I've ever interviewed, and he's really fun to watch. This Paris team this season has been pleasantly surprising at some points, but right now they're not clicking, and that's difficult to say as a Paris is winning champs supporter, as a Paris merch owner. But I don't see it happening here. I think London win this series and move on to losers round 2.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me too is, like I said, I think London will win this one. even though I'm picking pairs. But I think regardless of who wins this one, that Minnesota should win the next matchup against either team.
Yeah,
I
so
don't know.
I agree with you too. I think Minnesota wins losers round two,
Yeah.
regardless if London or Paris gets there. So let's go to the other losers round two matchup. Uh, this will be OpTic Chicago. We both agree that, well, you think for the pod's sake that Seattle will get there, but in your heart, in your soul, you believe that the LA Gorillas will get there. So if I guess you got to do
I want
both.
you to say it. I want you to say
LA Gorillas,
it.
they're doing it for fake OpTic. They're doing it for
Oh
the
my
fallen
god.
OpTic Gaming Los Angeles. They're doing it for LA and they're winning and they're knocking out OpTic and they're literally taking a sledgehammer to the green wall. Uh, I mean, it would be the most chaotic thing I think I've ever seen because Money Cheen, who came in at a very, very turbulent period in OGLA's season last season, and he helped that team out, and he bridged the gap between Dashi, who did not perform well for OGLA, and the Draza lineup at the end of the season, which performed well and was pleasantly surprising. He bridged that gap, and now he is going to tear down the green wall, and he's going to move on to round three of the losers bracket of the stage three
Holy
major.
shit. Man,
I take it you agree.
I'm picking OpTic to win this match regardless of who they play against. It gets tougher for them there. But I think regardless of OpTic's current form, they're gonna be motivated to try to get a win. Just like think like OpTic getting top 10 is just so weird. Like nobody at the start of the year, if you told them that OpTic was gonna get a top 10 in a major, like they would be like, no way. But like here we are. It's a possibility. I think OpTic will get the job done though, regardless. Obviously, I have them playing Seattle in my podcast bracket, so I think that should be an easier match for OpTic. And we saw OpTic play Seattle in group play, right? Where OpTic beat them before
Sounds right.
this little losing streak. So, yeah, if that's the matchup, I think OpTic will win the round two matchup, regardless of who they end up playing. But yeah, man, that would be something if you called that one.
So let me ask you a hypothetical question. Obviously, you believe the OpTic, regardless of who gets there, whether it's the Gorillas or Surge. But let's say that either of those teams they get there and then they beat OpTic, and OpTic does finish top 10 at the major. I don't. What they get money for this, right? Like they get money as long as you don't place last. I think you get some kind.
No,
Oh, so you have to finish top 8, right?
I believe so.
All right, so like
Mm,
regardless, I mean the money is not a big factor at all. I'm not saying that, but let's say that they finished top 10 at the major. Do you think OpTic would make a roster change between stage 3 major and the beginning of stage 4?
Firstly, you don't. So it's no money for all four teams that place top 10.
Okay.
The ninth and 10th place teams just get 10 CDL points, no money. Obviously, if you come in 11th or 12th, you get no points or no money. But to answer your question, no, I do not think OpTic will make a change regardless of what happens. I would be very surprised if they do. It seems like this is the team that, barring something absolutely unprecedented happening, like Stump retiring, just throwing it out there, not saying it's happening. Don't want any hate for saying it. But just as an example, like if Scump retired after this event for some reason, then yes, OpTic would obviously make a change. But I don't think there's I just don't see them making a change, barring anything extremely unexpected happening. Just because they had Scump and Formal really aren't going anywhere. I feel like they're both playing on OpTic until they retire. Obviously, we saw Formal get traded to LG for a little bit, but it seems like now like he's back and
Yeah,
he's there to
T2P is
stay.
back, so
That's
there's
what it
no.
seems like, yeah. So then it comes down to, are you gonna make a move to replace Dashi or Envoy? And I feel like at this point, like I don't want to, like it just feels like they're OpTic and Hex are trying to like have Envoy be that like that
Generational
person
guy.
to the person to kind of fill in Scump's shoes whenever, obviously Scump is inevitably going to retire. We don't know when that's going to happen, but it's going to happen one day, and it feels like OpTic wants Envoy to be the guy who picks up the torch and tries to fill in Scump's massive shoes as one of the best Call of Duty players of all time. So then that leaves Dashy, and I feel like if they made a change, they might do something there with him. But I don't know, like, it's not like a case where, the Thieves pick up Hook because they believe he's, like, a franchise player and, whatever those reasons might be. Like, I don't think there's someone who OpTic would be like, he's more talented than Dashy, so let's go get him to try and fix things. Maybe they try to sign somebody and they just bench Dashy, but, like, obviously we saw how that worked out last year and he wasn't like super happy about it. So I don't see a world where OpTic makes a change regardless of what they do at this major. I would be very surprised.
Yeah, OpTic is not a team that really makes in-season roster changes. It's not what they do typically. They obviously did in World War II. It didn't work out, just to say the least. Although Methods is available and he's been cooking in challengers, so we could y'all pull off a trade for Octane. Let's run it back from the World War II days, and
they would have to get Krim then.
I'm fine with that too. Let's run it all back. Like, I don't know what they could really do. Like I've said this in the past few episodes, or I believe last episode, that if they wanted to make a change, it would have been for Hook, in my opinion. I mean, that would have been the move, right? Like, he's the best player that's going to become available this season. I mean, that's, I think, undoubtable. There's no way that any...
Well, but who's Hook replacing?
It doesn't matter. Like, that's kind of the thing, though. It's a LA Thieves situation where he's a once-in-a-generation player. He is a great player. And if you're struggling, if you don't believe that you are a championship contender with your current roster, you have to make the upgrade, regardless if the roles make sense in the immediate future. And it's also because the off season is a thing, and Hook, it's kind of like a rental in traditional sports. You're essentially letting them audition for a permanent role. You're trying to figure out if they're going to be a permanent fixture in your lineup. And I mean, unless they're going for Vivid or something, and they see a future with like younger players, and I don't know. Like I think Dashy would be, if they do end up replacing a player, I think Dashy would be that guy, because he is performed the worst out of the four, in my opinion. And I just don't know. I agree with you, though. I don't think that'll make that change, but I think it's interesting to talk about because there's no... I mean, there's a precedent because OpTic has done poorly in the past. Obviously, it's been a while because they had their dynasty, and this is mid-season, and the CDL is different than the CWL and MLG. So there are restrictions, and it's just different now. But man, it's really hard to see a team that expects so much. Their fan base expects so much, like you said earlier in the show. There are high expectations and a 10th place finish, and you would either lose to the Gorillas, who have not looked good this season, or the Seattle Surge, who also have not looked good this season. You would be losing to one of the bottom three teams in the league in the second round of the losers bracket of a major. It's really hard to see a team that's so proud like OpTic to not make some sort of change after something like that. Thoughts?
No, go ahead.
No, I'm done. I'm out of breath talking about it, but
we could talk about this for hours, but that's like
it'll be an off-season special. Just talk about OpTic, and I mean, it's interesting. I don't know if it'll happen, but man, I would definitely be on Twitter.com and refreshing my feed as quickly as possible if that it does end up happening.
The other thing we got to remember too, just real quick, we don't have to stay on it too long, but we do know Stage 4 is going to land. So regardless of their placing at this major, I think that could be like part of that could be a factor in the thought process of we think we could be a good team on land, so we're not going to make a change regardless of what happened here. Obviously, that's just speculation, but that could play a role in it, in my opinion.
Yeah. So let's go back to the winners bracket. Atlanta FaZe versus the Dallas Empire. A really cool winners bracket match. I think we had talked about it last week about what kind of winners bracket matches we would like to see.
Yeah.
And I don't know if either of us mentioned this specific one, but I knew this was a possibility considering...
That's what I think we had just brought it up as a possibility, but we weren't sure, yeah.
Yeah, so FaZe, Empire, who do you have here?
I'm going with FaZe. Again, limited sample size there with Fellow. For Dallas, I think even with the Hook lineup for Dallas, I think FaZe probably still takes this one. Might have been another super close match. I'm not saying this one won't be, but I just think Atlanta is. I hate to say Atlanta's looking in form because again, like we talked about, they've lost 3 series all season, so it's like they were never out of form in my opinion. But regardless, they're looking, more like the dominant form that we saw early in the season, most recently. So I think Atlanta will take this one.
Yeah, I agree with you. Atlanta, they're looking really good. They have all season, but their search seems to be on point. There's no struggles or even real signs of weakness. Like I said earlier, they're 6-2 in Stage 3 group play and search, so that obviously shows. And they had really good teams in their group to test them. So yeah, I say FaZe, probably 3-1 or something here. And let's go to the Florida LA Thieves. We haven't seen very much of the Thieves with this lineup. Florida is relatively new with their lineup, although we have seen a lot more with Havoc in Florida. Who do you have here, Mutineers versus Thieves?
I'm picking Florida purely based off of the fact that we have only seen one match with Hook on the Thieves. And this could easily backfire on me because when we were talking at the last major, the Thieves, we're coming in with only 2 or 3 days of practice with the Draza replacing Slasher lineup.
Yeah.
And they went on that run through the loser bracket and got top 8, top 6?
Top 6.
Top 6, yeah. So, obviously that lack of practice wasn't an issue at the last major. It might not be an issue here. I am going to still pick Florida. I think this is a coin flip series that I could easily see the Thieves also winning it. But I just think this is a case where if Big Wake and Skies have one of those, another pop-off performance, it's going to be tough for the Thieves to match that firepower, and that could be the way that Florida takes this one.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Thieves here, but I agree with you that if Awakening and Skies show up like we know they are able to, I think Florida takes this, especially with how inexperienced the Thieves are with this specific lineup. And in their just entire team in general, because they've changed around so much this season, because you have Draza, who has not been in the lineup for very long, maybe a month or so. Same with Venom. Kenny's obviously been there all season long. And then Hook is coming in, and he's a great player, but things are different. I just think there's too much talent on the Thieves to not win this, in my opinion. And I think that they showed that they were able, that they were, I don't know, they were kind of coming together in that New York series. Obviously, that's a very difficult team to debut a roster against, especially with how well New York has been playing in hardpoint. So I'll say Thieves, but I can really see it going either way here.
Yep, no, I think this is a super 50-50 matchup, and it's not necessarily, obviously the Thieves are a popular team, but it's not like your brand name OpTic versus FaZe matchup, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of a matchup like that, I think this is a super interesting round 1 match that should have more eyes on it than it likely will get.
Let's say in the winners bracket we just have 2 more matches. 2 more matches in round 2. Ultra versus FaZe. We both picked FaZe in our first round, so this is a rematch of the Stage 2 Major Grand Finals. Obviously, Toronto won, and they also played earlier in the Stage 2 Major, and FaZe won that one. Who do you see winning in this one?
This is super tough. I
Mhm.
think, in my opinion, man, I'm picking Atlanta. That's not what I'm tossing back and forth. Obviously, that's a bit of a controversial pick because you're right. Toronto's on this huge winning streak, and most people probably think Toronto will take this one, but um, I just think this is a case where if Atlanta comes out and they have that momentum from that first round matchup against Dallas and they take care of business there, get a big win,
Mhm.
that might be like the catalyst to kind of start uh, giving FaZe the momentum they need in what's going to be a super tough matchup. And I don't think there's any world where either Toronto dominates FaZe or FaZe dominates Toronto, right? Like I think this is going to be a very tough matchup that goes all the way down to the wire. Now the big thing here is Toronto has been extremely good in search, like we talked
Yeah.
about, 11-1 in their last 12. So I think if FaZe gets this done, they can't let it go to a game 5, right? Like, it's tough to say because we don't know how the vetoes would shake out, so we don't know where FaZe's S&D pick would be. But just in theory, based on how good Toronto's search has been lately, you don't want to play them in 2 searches. So FaZe is going to have to get it done in 4. If obviously they don't have to, but in my opinion, I think if they want to win this one, they have to try to win it without it going to a game 5. But I'm really, if we see this matchup in round 2, it's going to be a really spicy one in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Toronto here. I think Toronto is a bad matchup for Atlanta because Atlanta, in most of their other matchups, they have the advantage in search, and it's just not. They do not have the advantage in search, in my opinion, against Toronto, especially with how well they've been playing. Like you said, 11-1 in their last 12. They showed in the Stage 2 Major. They essentially were throwing their hard points away, and they would come back and they would win regardless of that. So Toronto has cleared that up, and they're able to come out and win game 1. If it goes to a game 4, win that game 4. And when you add in how well they've been playing in search, I think that's a really difficult team to beat. But
Yep.
if there is a team to beat them, it would be Atlanta, in my opinion. But
Yep.
I'll say Toronto. I'll say 3-1 in this scenario, and they'll move on to the winners finals. And then the other matchup, you have Florida moving on to play the New York Subliners. I have the Thieves moving on to play the Subliners. So Florida Subliners, who do you have there?
I think this is another case similar to what we were talking about earlier in the lower bracket where New York should beat either of these teams in this round 2 matchup. Again, it's going to come down to that hard point because, like we said, they are undefeated in hard point in stage 3. Will they be able to keep that up? If they are able to, they should be able to take care of business here. So I'm going to say New York wins 3-1, just assuming they win 2 hard points and then either the search or the control, whatever. But yeah, I think I would be surprised if New York lost to either of these teams, especially considering again that if the Thieves are able to beat Florida, this would still be the Thieves' 3rd match with Hook.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I'm giving New York the edge here.
Yeah, I'm giving New York the edge too, just because of the experience. And it's not like they have a wealth of experience with Hydra in their lineup. No, but just have to get over that because every team in the league, other than FaZe and OpTic, they don't have a ton of experience with their lineup. I guess Toronto, since it's been like an entire like 2 stages essentially since they brought in Insight, but there's no I don't think that New York is I don't basically what I'm trying to say is New York, they have an advantage in experience. It's not a great advantage, but they've looked really good in the short time that they've had Hydra. Like you said earlier in the show, they've been excellent in hard point with Hydra in the lineup. He's been excellent in hard point specifically, and that's really helped the team. And this will only be the third matchup for Hook, and it's kind of hard to pick them over the subliners who have played so well in one of the most important game modes in the game. So I'll go with New York here, and so I'll put them in the winners finals. Let's drop down to the losers bracket now. I think this is where we switch, where
No,
we don't switch.
no. So
This league, man.
they switch in the next one. So in this one, it just drops straight down from
Okay.
round 1 to 3. So in my scenario, Dallas would play OpTic, and then I would have the Thieves playing Minnesota. You would have Florida playing Minnesota.
Yeah, so I'll go first because I have the LA Gorillas versus the Dallas Empire in this scenario. And I mean, there's no reason to pick against the Gorillas here because they are coming off of a win against OpTic Chicago. They've torn down the green wall, and they might as well go for the reigning champions in the next round. So I'll go LAG.
All right. This is an exciting one for me because I have Dallas versus OpTic.
Clasico.
The E Clasico, yeah. And I think it's tough either way. Like, this is where, like, obviously, I think it's going to be hard for OpTic to get a top 10 placing in this. Like, I don't see they shouldn't lose to either of the teams from their round 1 matchup. But I think they could lose this one against Dallas. I'm picking Dallas to win this one, just based on, Dallas has had its struggles with fellow in the lineup, but OpTic has been struggling. Whereas on the other hand, though, if OpTic gets to this match with Dallas, they would be coming off a win. Dallas would be coming off a loss. So maybe that win, OpTic gets that major mojo. They're in a tournament environment. They get, the momentum. That could be what they need to go on a little bit of a loser's bracket run. I don't see that happening. I guess it's obviously a possibility.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pick Dallas. So I guess I feel like there's a lot of coin flip matches here where really anything can happen. And again, that's just a testament to the competitiveness of this league this year. But I think this will be a close one that Dallas takes, and that's what I'm sticking with.
In the other losers bracket round 3 match, I have Florida versus Minnesota. You have the LA Thieves versus Minnesota.
Yep.
I personally think that the Rocker will win that match regardless of who drops down. And again, I believe the Thieves are going to win the winners bracket match, but even if they didn't, I think that essentially Rocker are very good. They're a very, very good 4th place team. It's really not like either one of these teams, OpTic or Minnesota, these are not the teams that you want to see in losers round 2 because there's a very good chance that you'll be going out of the tournament early. And I think in this case, Rocker, they'll have some momentum from beating either London or Paris, and whatever team is coming down obviously does not have any momentum coming off their loss. So I go with the Rocker here.
Yep. Same. I obviously have the Rocker playing the Thieves, and I picked Minnesota to win that. So I technically had the Thieves going 0-2 in this major, which would be very surprising just based off of, it goes against the principle of them having limited practice going into the stage 2 major, but they go off the run. And now I'm basically saying they have limited practice in this major, but they're not going to go on a run.
Yeah.
So, it's tough, man. But I just think, similar to what you said, I still think Minnesota's a good team. We saw what they're capable of. Whether you thought it was a honeymoon phase or not, we saw what the team's capable of since bringing Standy into the lineup. And I just think that they'll be able to get the job done, like you said, against either of these teams. Which, Florida did beat Minnesota in group play. So if the Thieves beat Florida and Florida comes down to Minnesota, that might be a tougher matchup where Florida is able to, take a win. But for my bracket, I'm going to say Minnesota 3-2 over Thieves. I think it would be a close series where Minnesota, clutches up in the search to take it.
Yeah, so let's go to losers round 4. You said it switches here, so
this switches now.
So I would have LAG versus LA
Oh.
Because I have New York.
I would have Florida versus Dallas and Toronto versus Minnesota. So you would have Florida versus, so you would have, because you had New York, LAT, and
And
LAT
LAT
losing.
losing. So LAT,
Yeah, so
LAG.
LAT versus LAG. Okay.
And
then FaZe
Minnesota.
versus Minnesota.
Ooh, yes. This would be a nice round. This, like, if this actually happened, which it obviously will because all of my predictions always come true. I say LAG and LAT. Ooh, I mean LAG kind of has their they upset them in the first major,
Mhm.
and that was a really big upset considering LAG were the only team to have a losing record in the winners bracket, and LAT had looked really, really good. I, ooh, I mean, I can't pick against LAG if they get this far, right? Like I can't, at least not against a rival. So I say LAG. I think they win and they move on. And what does this get them into like top four or something crazy?
Top four, yeah.
Yeah. So this is what I did last time, but I
Yep.
think it'll happen again. And so we'll see. LAG over LAT for me. What do you think in your
Do
scenario?
your other one. Do your other one.
Okay, so I got Minnesota versus Atlanta in my other round four match. Man, I can't pick it against Atlanta. I know that we were just hyping up Minnesota literally a minute and a half ago, and it's really nothing against Minnesota. It's that Atlanta is really, really good. I wouldn't have put them in the losers bracket if they were playing any other team other than Toronto. So I think Atlanta is the team.
Yep. Okay. So that means you would have LAG versus Atlanta in your round 5 losers bracket.
Sounds about right.
For me, I would have Florida playing against Dallas, and then Toronto versus Minnesota. This is where, in my head, it kind of feels like, Florida had just beaten Dallas. So it's a tougher matchup than some people might think. I'm going to pick Dallas. But this circles back to the OpTic thing, where if OpTic gets to this point and they're the team playing against Florida, in my scenario, that's where OpTic could go on one of those, like LAT runs through the loser bracket where they're just winning a couple matches, and then OpTic would be in a position to be top 4, which is where some people would expect them to be regardless of recent struggles. But for the sake of this bracket, I have Dallas beating Florida and then Toronto beating Minnesota.
Yeah, so should I just continue on in round 5 losers bracket?
We didn't do winners final, so you can do your winners final. You have Toronto versus New York.
I mean,
and Atlanta versus New York.
I'm gonna go with Toronto. I think they're the
Then
best
I'm
team.
going with Atlanta.
Yeah, so I think they're the best team in the game, Toronto, and I think that as much as I respect New York, and it would be incredible to see that kind of upset, especially with Hydra in the lineup in New York, basically their first stage with this roster. I don't see it happen. I think Ultra win that series.
Yeah, I think that's obviously, like I said, Toronto versus Atlanta was a tough one for me.
Mm-hmm.
And they ended up going with Atlanta. I think New York versus Toronto, or I can see Toronto having an easier time beating New York than Atlanta would, just because obviously New York beat
Atlanta. Yeah.
Atlanta most recently. Yeah, so in that match, New York won both hard points, obviously, because they're undefeated in it. So that's going to be a tough one for me. Just again, Atlanta has to. They go from being in a situation where against Toronto, you have to either steal a search against a really good search team or not let it get to that game 5, right?
Yeah.
But then it's the opposite if they get to this matchup with New York, where you have to try to steal a hard point and make sure you win the searches. If you lose both hard points, you then have to win 2 searches in the control to get the job done. So a little bit tougher for me, in my opinion. I think if you're a New York fan and you have New York get into this winter finals, I think you would rather see Atlanta play against Atlanta than Toronto, just because you've seen them beat Atlanta most recently. But I'm kind of, my theme for this bracket, obviously we'll get to our overall prediction later, but it's kind of just, sticking with Atlanta as, they're the top team and they're going to try to reassert their dominance here. So that's where my head's at. Again, super tough matchup if it's Atlanta versus New York, but I'll say Atlanta gets the job done in the winners finals to get to the grand finals.
Dropping down to losers, we obviously have very different paths here. I have the Gorillas versus the Atlanta FaZe, which is the matchup we've all been waiting for. And I mean, I want to go with the Gorillas, but I'm not going to.
Wow.
I mean, I wanna do it so bad, but my heart is saying yes, my brain is saying no. I think Atlanta is the better team slightly, and that I think that Atlanta is a bad matchup for the Gorillas, as are quite a few teams in the leagues at times. But but FaZe is really good. I think that they're probably the second best team in the league. Yeah, you can make the case that New York is better than them at the moment, but either way, I believe that they're a top 3 team, and I feel like they'll move on and get top 3 at this event.
Yep. I have Dallas versus Toronto in this losers round 5, and I'm going with Toronto. They obviously just 2 weeks ago, was it? Maybe it might have been 3 weeks ago. I don't remember, but very recently in stage 3 group play, Toronto swept Dallas. So I think if it gets to this point, Toronto should be able to take care of business once again.
It was week
they
1.
would. Yeah. So, longer. It just feels a long time ago, even though it's really not. But Toronto would be coming off. This would be, in my scenario, Toronto coming off their first loss in, what'd you say, over a month. So that might be, similar to them in the last major where they went on that little run on Sunday in the losers bracket. This could be a similar situation where Toronto's down in the lower bracket again and try to, make the magic happen.
The biggest difference in this match would be that Dallas, that they have more experience with Fellow in their lineup, because that was the first match with Fellow.
Correct.
And Rambo said after the fact that they should have been up 2-0 or something like that.
They thought they should have been up 2-1, I think. Yeah, something like that.
So they felt confident after the fact, and I mean it's an interesting matchup if it happens, just to see if Dallas has improved, or I guess if they've caught up to Toronto at all. It'll be interesting. Let's move on. We have the losers finals. I have FaZe versus the Subliners. And who do you have in your losers finals?
New York versus Toronto.
All right, so we both have New York here. I think Atlanta will win this. They'll beat New York. I mean, I just said a moment ago that these are the two of the top 3 teams. They're either, New York is either second or third, and Atlanta is either second or third. They're just kind of competing at this point for it. New York did beat Atlanta earlier in the stage, but I think Atlanta has kind of figured out some of their S&D, I guess, issues, if that's the word you want to use. But as long as they don't lose that first search to New York, I mean, they really have to win 2-3-5 in this series. I mean, they don't have to, of course, but that's probably the most likely scenario for them, considering New York literally hasn't lost a hardpoint map the stage with Hydra. So I'll say FaZe win 3-2.
Yep, and I have Toronto versus New York, and I'm going with Toronto there. Similar to what we were talking about in the potential winners finals showdowns there. I think Toronto is a tougher matchup for New York than FaZe, just based on the fact that we saw New York beat FaZe earlier. So I think Toronto would win this one and get that rematch with Atlanta in the grand finals, which we both end up having Atlanta versus Toronto in the grand finals.
Yeah, so we have a consensus here that it will be a Toronto-Atlanta grand finals, which is probably the most exciting outcome, barring a huge losers bracket run from the Gorillas and they play Toronto and they ruin Toronto's winning streak. But other than that, to see a rematch of the stage 2 major finals, and to see if Atlanta can get, I mean, in my scenario, Atlanta would try to get their revenge on Toronto from a loss earlier in the tournament, as well as that stage 2 major finals. For you, it would be if Atlanta can prove that they are really the better team than Toronto. Who do you have in this series in the grand finals to win Stage 3 Major?
I picked Atlanta to win the matchup in round 2, and I'm gonna pick them again in the grand finals. No, might be a hot take or however you want to word it, but I feel like Toronto would be the easy pick right now for most brackets, and want to be a little different. So I'm going with FaZe. Most notably, obviously, we saw with the best of 9 showdown last time that it goes hardpoint search control, then back to search hardpoint, and then the last map would have been search. So again, it's going to come down to, the old adage that search wins championships.
Mhm.
Which of these teams is able to get the job done in that mode? So it'll be interesting if we end up seeing this matchup. I think it would be an exciting best of 9 either way. But yeah, for the sake of being different, I am picking FaZe. Picked them earlier, gonna stick with them. FaZe to win the Stage 3 Major.
I'm going with Toronto. I think like basically what you said, but the opposite, because I picked Toronto in that round 2 matchup against Atlanta. I think Atlanta is a great team, and they're probably the second best team in the league, but they're the second best team in the league, not the best in my opinion. And I think Toronto will come out and win. They've just looked really incredible in all game modes, and there really hasn't been any signs of weakness at all throughout basically since they lost to FaZe during the Stage 2 Major, even with a little hiccups with their hard points and everything. But I think Toronto's going to be the Stage 3 Major champions here.
Sweet.
Who's your dark horse? So we've figured out the champions for the Stage 3 Major, but who would you consider a dark horse for the Major?
Yeah, so that's I guess it comes down to what you consider a dark horse, right? So it'd be weird for me to say New York is my dark horse just because they came in first place in their group, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like they aren't getting that consideration that most people think Toronto is probably going to win just based on recent performance. If you're not picking Toronto, you're probably picking FaZe. And then after that, it feels like it's just a drop-off, right? So that's why I think you could make an argument to say that New York would be a dark horse. I'm not really sure that how much I agree with it, but just based on that logic, I will say New York is my dark horse. It feels weird to say it like that, but if we want to consider it with a loser Cinderella or something like that, I kind of already hinted at it where I could see OpTic being the team to go on a loser Cinderella run. Obviously, your answer is going to be LAG, but for me, just based on how the bracket shakes down in my head, they have that first round matchup with either LAG or Seattle. If they win that one, that could be, it stops their losing streak. It could be the momentum they need to take down. I mean, I guess it could be Atlanta or Dallas. If it's Atlanta, that kind of, in my opinion, would put an end to any hope of a Cinderella run. But with Dallas, the recent change, all that, we've already touched on it. That could be the edge with a win for OpTic to, kind of push them forward and give them the confidence maybe that they might need to turn things around.
Yeah, obviously I'll go with LAG, but if LAG does get knocked out within the first 2 rounds of losers bracket, I think OpTic is the clear they're the most likely Cinderella. And I mean it's basically a weird Cinderella though, because they're a good team. They're in the top half of the league, I think, in the standings, or if they're not, I mean, they would have to be in the top 6, right? Or very close to it. But I mean, they're a really good team. They were just in, they got 3rd or 4th in that first major or something. Anyway,
4th,
they've shown that they can be one of the best teams. They slumped at the wrong time. It ended up resulting in a losers bracket appearance, which they obviously didn't want to start the major out in the losers bracket. But I mean, they'd have to beat either LAG or Seattle, and then they would have a tough matchup with either FaZe or Atlanta coming down, which would,
FaZe or Dallas.
or yeah, excuse, yeah, FaZe or the Empire, which would be a very tough matchup for them. But I mean, maybe they can pull that off, and then they would have either, New York, Florida, or LAT coming down after that, and it's not like any of those three teams are easy, but it's better than hopefully Toronto coming down and being there, because if you had to play like Atlanta and Toronto and Dallas all in the losers bracket, it would be incredibly tiring for them. But I mean, I think it's possible. They could very well make top 4 at this event, and I mean that's what they expected themselves, I guess.
And that's like the thing to me, like, regardless of what you consider a dark horse or a Cinderella run, like, this most reminds me of, recently, Black Ops 4 champs, we saw, like, the Thieves, who were one of the top teams going into Black Ops 4 champs, they lose early, and then they had that super close series with FaZe for top 16, and they go on that losers bracket run to make it to the grand finals. Right, so like you consider that a Cinderella run, even though the Thieves were a top team. And then obviously in World War II, you had Rise. I think it was at CWL Seattle, where they didn't make it out of group play, I think, or something, and they started in like losers bracket round 1, and they went all the way, and they beat EG in 2 series in the grand finals to win the whole thing. I'm pretty sure that was Seattle, but yeah, I mean we've seen this before, where what you consider top teams have to go on long losers bracket runs, and like I just feel like that's what, regardless of how good those teams are, you still consider that a Cinderella run. So like it's not a knock on OpTic to say like we think they're going on a Cinderella run. It's just the position they are in the bracket, based on that and how we think they're able to go on a run to win a couple matches and string some wins together.
Yeah. That concludes our stage 3 major discussion. We differ on the champions, but we're on a consensus with who should be in the grand finals and who will be. Atlanta versus Toronto, which would be an incredible rematch of we would get hopefully two rematches here if that happens. So unless you have anything, I think we're good to wrap up the show.
Yeah, I don't think we kind of went a little longer, so
yeah.
Obviously we'll have sort of like a break week after the major, but we'll recap the major, and then we'll have the following week to start stage 4 group play. So we can talk about some of the other stuff next week after we recap what happened in the major. But just a few quick points that I wanted to bring up was that Call of Duty announced that the Season 3 mid-season update for Black Ops Cold War is coming out on May 20th. So it's unconfirmed that Standoff will actually be joining the game with this mid-season update, but a lot of people think that's when it could happen, just because Activision said that the Standoff was going to come in season, so they didn't give an actual date, and we don't know if it's definitely coming with the mid-season update, but it would make sense. So stay tuned for that. We might see Standoff in the game next week, which would obviously be exciting, and then potentially we could see Standoff added to CDL rotation for Stage 4. So again, we'll unconfirmed there, but we'll be looking forward to that potentially happening next week. If it does happen next week, we'll obviously talk about it on the next episode of the podcast. And other than that, the only other thing that I feel like we have to at least touch on, we touched on a little bit, but it was officially confirmed that the Stage 4 major will be held on LAN. So after, it's been over a year since the last LAN event for COD, right? It was at the LA Home Series in MW in like March, I think it was last year. So it's been a long time coming, obviously. Whole bunch of circumstances surrounding the pandemic and everything that prevented it, but it's definitely going to be exciting to be back on LAN when that happens. But real quick, just the major in Stage 4 will be held on LAN. It'll be in Dallas, and it'll start on June 17th. Stage 4 group play will still be played online, and the major will not have a live crowd or fans in attendance, just the teams and limited CDL staff is what the CDL said. due to the pandemic. So, we can talk about that more, obviously, as Stage 4 progresses and we get closer to the major. But it's certainly exciting that we have confirmation that we will see Call of Duty back on land this year.
Yeah, and I think that the players are excited, obviously, because I mean everybody thinks that they're going to be the player that really pops off on land. That actually can't happen. Not everybody can be better on land and everybody succeed. So we'll see who gets called a warrior after the first land back. Some of these players haven't played on land.
I mean, even guys like Awakening haven't. Like, we saw
Yeah,
Awakening, I think he was on one of the like amateur teams that didn't play well at Black
yeah,
Ops 4 Champs, I believe. Like, so he's played on land, but like he hasn't played in the pro league on
yeah.
land.
Same with Mac
Uh,
and obviously
there's
any
a bunch of
rookie.
guys, yeah.
So it'll be interesting. If you're a fan and you're hoping to go to a LAN event, I mean, you could cross your fingers for champs. I wouldn't expect. We're obviously not going to get fans at the Stage 4 major. Not expecting any for the Stage 5 major, or if there is like a Stage 5 group play on LAN. I don't expect fans for either of those. But champs, I think it's not a. I don't know if it's a realistic look, but I think especially if they do end up holding it in Texas, Texas has relatively lax COVID restrictions as far as public gatherings, and we would be pushing into mid-August, which, I mean, let's just hope that within 3 months the pandemic is a little bit better with more people getting vaccines and everything. So we'll see, but I mean, maybe for champs we can all get together and we can chow Jim to drinking or something, and he can pass out after half of a margarita or something like that. But yeah,
Uh,
that's all I have. If you have anything to add, we could wrap up. One thing I want to implore you guys to subscribe on whatever platform you're listening or watching on. If you're watching on Twitch, we stream this live starting at 11:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Tuesday. Unless they change the schedule, we'll be here every Tuesday night. So watch it live on Twitch. You can follow us at twitch.tv/Ego Chall Podcast. If you're interested in the video version but you can't catch it live, go to youtube.com and Ego Chall Podcast. We upload all of our VODs to YouTube the day after we record. Also, we're on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts, make sure to give us a 5-star rating. It helps boost us in the rankings in the podcast search. And yeah, that's all I got. You got anything, Bink?
yeah. Just, real quick, like you were saying, we don't gotta talk about it, but fans for champs might not happen. I don't believe it will, but it would obviously be exciting if there's a safe way, if the CDL finds a safe way to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
Just because, the fans have been waiting for COD to be back on land. So, other than that, as always, thanks for tuning in, and hopefully you guys enjoyed. Going to be an exciting week with the major coming up. So looking forward to that. And as always, remember to send the chow.